Hi guys, welcome to Unit 6, Lesson 15. This is the last of the lessons that we're going to do for Unit 6. There are more in your book, but we just kind of ran out of time and we're going to skip over those and then move on to Unit 7. So, our learning targets for Lesson 15 are here. I can find solutions to equations with exponents in a list of numbers, and I can replace a variable with a number in an expression with exponents and operations and use the correct order to evaluate the expression. So wow, that was a lot. But let's go ahead and just get started. So for 15.1, it says find the values of 3 to the x power and 1/3 to the x power for different values of x. So here we have all the different values of x that we're going to put into where x is, and we're going to solve for it. So for the first one, we're going to put this number 1 into the x spot. So we're going to have 3 to the first power. So what that is telling you is the amount of times that we are going to multiply 3 by itself. Now, when we have 3 squared, we're multiplying 3 times 3. So when we just have 3 to the first power, we're just going to get 3. I know that's a little bit confusing, but 3 to the first power is just 3 by itself. Same with 1/3 to the first power, it's just going to be 1/3. So anytime you see a number to the first power, it's just that number. You don't have to do anything to it. So let's go ahead and put those answers in. We have 3 here, and we have 1/3 here. Now let's do the second one. So for this one, we're going to go ahead and replace our x with a 2. And 3 squared is the same thing as 3 times 3. Okay, and 3 times 3 is 9. And so that's going to go right in this box. 1/3 squared is the same thing as 1/3 times 1/3. Remember, it's 1/3 times 1/3 and not 1/3 plus 1/3. And so you're going to end up with 1/9. Okay? If you can, pause this video and try the rest on your own, and then unpause it when you're done, just to see if you could do it on your own. So for this one, we're going to go ahead and put 3 to the third power, which is the same thing as 3 times 3 times 3, which equals 27. And then on the next spot, we have 1/3 cubed, or to the third power, which is 1/3 times 1/3 times 1/3. And again, 1 times 1 times 1 is 1 over 3 times 3 times 3, which is 27. Okay, last one. We have 3 to the fourth power, which is 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 3 is 9. 9 times 9 is 81. And then here we have 1/3 to the fourth power, which is 1/3 times 1/3 times 1/3 times 1/3. And you're going to end up with 1/81. Okay. Number 2 says, what patterns do you notice? So look at your chart and look at the numbers and pause the video and try and come up with some patterns that you noticed. Unpause the video when you have some. Okay, hopefully you did that. Some patterns that you may notice if you're looking at each row is that the denominator here is the same number in the column beforehand. And that makes a lot of sense if you think of the fact that 3 and 1/3 are what are called reciprocals. So remember we learned this big word way back when we were doing division of fractions. And what that means is that they're just the same number flipped around. 1/3 and 3/1, or just 3, are the same number. They're just flipped. And so when you are doing exponents, the exponent of that reciprocal is going to be the same thing, but just the reciprocal of the answer. So for instance, what I'm trying to say is 3 squared and 1/3 squared are the 3 and 1/3 are the reciprocal of each other, and the answers, the solutions, are also going to be the reciprocal. So we have 9 and then we have 1/9. Okay, these are also just flipped around. So for instance, if I gave you the number 10 cubed, that would be the reciprocal of 1/10 cubed. So 10 cubed, for instance, is 1,000, because 10 times 10 times 10 is 1,000, and 1/3 cubed would be 1/1,000. Okay, very good. Let's go ahead and move on. To 15.3. I'm sorry, 15.2. It says to evaluate each expression when given the value of x. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and replace the value into where the x is, and we need to remember to use our order of operations. So starting with parentheses, then exponents, then multiplication, then division, then addition, and then subtraction. Okay, so 3x squared when x is 10. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this using 10. Now remember, in our order of operations, exponents is coming before multiplication. So for that reason, I'm going to do this chunk first, and I'm going to end up with 100, because 10 times 10 is 100. Now I have 3 times 100, and I'm going to get 300 as my answer. Had I not followed my order of operations, I would have gotten 30 and then squared 30, and that would have not given me the right answer. All right, number 2, 3x squared when x is 1/9. So 3 times 1/9 squared. I need to do the 1/9 squared first. 1/9 times 1/9 is 1/81. And now I'm going to multiply that by 3. I'm going to end up with 3/81. Okay. X to the third over 4 when x is 4. So we have x to the third over 4, which is 4 to the third over 4. Okay, so again, we're going to do our exponents first. 4 cubed, which is 4 times 4 times 4, or 16 times 4, which is 64, over 4. So 64 over 4 is the exact same as 64 divided by 4, and we just did 16 times 4 and got 64. So from that, I can see that 64 divided by 4 is just going to equal 16. And so that's going to be my answer for this one. I'm going to go ahead and erase some of this work so that you guys can still see and you're not confused. Okay, next one. X cubed over 4 when x is 1/2. So we're going to have 1/2 cubed over 4. 1/2 cubed is 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2. And you're going to end up with 1/8 over 4. So 1/8 over 4 is 1/8 divided by 4, which is the same thing as 1/8 times 1/4. And so you're going to end up with 1/32 as your answer. The reason this is the same as this is because, remember, when you're dividing with fractions, you have to flip and you have to multiply. Okay. Next we have, hold on, let me erase this. Next we have 9 plus x over 7 when x is 1. So we have 9 plus, not x over 7, sorry, x to the 7th power. 9 plus x, and 9 plus 1 to the 7th power. So we have 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 times 1, which is going to give us 1. 9 plus 1 is 10. Okay. Lastly, 9 plus x to the 7th when x is 1/2. So for this one, we're going to have 9 plus 1/2 to the 7th, which is 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2. I'm going to end up with 1 over, 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16, times 2 is 32, times 2 is 64. Sorry, I'm right. Just making sure I'm staying on track. Okay, 64 times 2 is 128. So we're going to end up with 1 over 128 as our answer. Okay, I'm just going to double check my work to make sure that I did 2 to the 7th power, not 2 to the 6th. So we did 2 times 2, which was 4. That was squared. Then we did 4 times 2. Then we got 8. That was cubed. Then we got 8 times 2, which was 16. And then that was to the 4th power. And then we did 16 times 2 and got 32. That was the 5th power. 32 times 2 was 64. Okay. And then 64 times 2. Good. Okay. Those were all of the answers for this one. What we did was we took different values of x and we plugged them in. Now let's go ahead and look at 15.3. Find a solution to each equation in the list that follows. So when it says find a solution, it means we're trying to figure out what x is to make the equation true. So we have all of these possibilities on the bottom, and we need to plug them in to see if it's true. So for example, number 1, 64 equals x squared. So I don't see any fractions in this, so I'm going to just start by guessing a solid number. So let's start by plugging in a 3. 3 squared, or 3 times 3, is equal to 9, not 64. So that one doesn't work, and I think I'm going to have to try a lot bigger. Let's try 6. 6 squared is 6 times 6, which is 36. So that also doesn't work. Let's go ahead and try 8. 8 squared, or 8 times 8, is equal to 64. So this, number 1, is going to be 8. X equals 8. Okay. I'm going to cross this out because we already got that one. Let's try the next one. 64 equals x cubed. Okay, I know that this has to be much smaller than 8 because we did x squared above. So let's try 5. If x was 5, we have 5 times 5 times 5. 5 times 5 is 25. 25 times 5 is 125. So that definitely did not work. Let's try smaller. Let's try 3. 3 cubed is 3 times 3 times 3, which is equal to 27. So that didn't work either. Let's try 4. 4 cubed is 4 times 4 times 4. 4 times 4 is 16, and 16 times 4 is 64. So that worked perfectly. So for this one, we have x equals 4. Okay. I really want you guys to try these on your own, but I'm going to go ahead and do one of the fraction problems with you just to make sure that you're aware of how to kind of do that. So let's go ahead and look at number 4. So here we're going to have 2 fifths times 2 fifths times 2 fifths. 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 is 8 over 5 times 5 is 25 times 5 is 125. And so here we have 8 over 125, which is right here. But I think that number 5 might be a little trickier, so let's do number 5. 16 ninths is equal to x squared. So what number squared is going to give us 16 over 9? In order to do this, I'm going to think about the number 16 and the number 9 and what two numbers multiply by themselves to get 16 and 9. And the answer to that is 4 and 3, okay? Because 16 is equal to 4 times 4, and 9 is equal to 3 times 3. And so, let's see, if you had 4 over 3 times 4 over 3, you would end up with 16 over 9. So number 5 is going to be 4/3. Okay, I think that you guys can do the rest on your own. This one might be a little tricky, so if you are still confused, please come to our math class tomorrow morning on Zoom and do all the practice problems. I look forward to seeing you guys then. Bye-bye.